the nerdy Halisimmer.
Hey guys, welcome to another aircraft review. This time we are not in X-Plane, we're in Aerofly FS2. Initially released in 2016, it was marketed as a high-performance simulation platform catering especially to virtual reality users. In a free update in 2018, they added this helicopter flight model to the sim. It's a Robinson R22 and it was praised as the most realistic helicopter flight model out there. So let's see. 3D modeling, as you can see, is very good. High quality textures. It looks just like the real thing, apart maybe from the fact that it shines like a new dime. Something that you might not expect from an aircraft that gets pushed around a lot, with it being one of the most successful training aircraft out there. So we're going to go through a real-life R22 checklist for startup. First thing is release the rotor brake. Next thing, put the fuel shut-off valve to on. It is a little hidden behind the left pilot seat. Then we check for the circuit breakers to be all pushed in. However, I didn't care to check that. I don't think they are operable. As I do my flight controls check here, unfortunately there is not a plug-in that shows you guys what I'm doing with my controls. So sorry about that. Interior graphics are also very nice. Next step in the checklist would be check the friction on for collective and cyclic. However, friction is not operable. You can move the friction wheel of the cyclic, but it doesn't seem to have any effect. The R22 has a heating system to prevent icing of the carburetor, which could lead to engine failure. For startup, we're going to assure that the carb heat switch is in the down position, so off. I'm going to quickly change viewpoints here to the co-pilot seat. That's the carb heat there, and it's supposed to be down. Next on the checklist is mixture to full rich. Now, as in the real R22, there is a plastic guard that you sort of just put on to the mixture lever so you do not accidentally pull it out in flight. We check that the avionics are switched to off and that the clutch is disengaged. That's the switch with the red plastic guard cover on the main panel. For engine start, we switch on the battery and the strobe lights or anti-collision lights. There's a fuel quantity gauge, a cylinder head temperature gauge, and an oil temperature and oil pressure gauge. During flight, we constantly monitor the manifold pressure gauge. This aircraft is limited on manifold pressure, so you should not pull more than 25 inches. Now I'm opening up the throttle halfway to prime the engine, and afterwards I'm going to close the throttle again. Checking the area behind the helicopter left and right, and we can also see the beacon is working. So let's start the engine. Magneto switch to start and then back to both. We can see the engine RPMs on the dual tag rise, and we should have an oil pressure of above 25%. While I test the warning lights by simply pushing them in and making sure that they light up. Sorry about the sound, apparently something went wrong. Currently there doesn't seem to be too much of a competition for IPACS R22 here. There is an X-Plane 10 version by Dreamfoil, however it is not suitable for X-Plane 11. And there is one by Big Tire Productions for X-Plane 11, however I read that it is not very good. I haven't tried it out myself though. Alright, after this short warm-up at 55% engine RPM, we are going to activate the alternator and engage the clutch. Now you will see the clutch light come on the main panel. Now we're going to wait for that light to go out, which means that the clutch is fully engaged. We might have induced a little bit of throttle should the RPMs drop too much. The sound is pretty good. As we see the rotor spool up, we also hear a little bit of a blade slap come in. Our clutch light is off, so I'm going to roll on the throttle to 75% engine RPM. Now let's do the pre-flight checks and see how deep the simulation really is. First thing is the magneto check. I'm going to put the magneto switch into the right position, so only the right magnetos. And I'm going to look for a slight drop in RPM, which is there. Switch back to both, and once the RPMs have stabilized, I'm going to do the same test with the left magnetos. And there's the drop in RPM, so that's very good. Should drop more than 7% on the RPM gauge. Now don't forget to put the magneto switch back to both. Now we're going to check the carb heating. Pulling in the carb heat now, and we should see a short rise and then a drop on the carburetor temperature gauge, as well as a short drop and rise in RPM. I don't really see it here, so that's unfortunate. They seem to not have simulated the carb heat at all. Also no reaction whatsoever once I switch carb heat off. Alright, let's go on. Now for the simple needle split test, I'm going to roll off throttle. Yep, it works. It doesn't necessarily have to be like this in every aircraft. Sometimes it's, depending on the machine, pretty hard to get a needle split in the first place. But it works with this one. We can see the governor light is still on, so let's switch on the governor on the tip of the collective. Quickly checking that all our gauges are in the green, and then I'm ready to roll on the throttle, and we will see the governor take over, spooling up the engine as well as the rotor RPM to 104%. Last but not least, we're going to check the low RPM warning. I'm going to roll off the throttle a little, and I'm pulling in collective, and I expect to hear the warning horn as well as see the light. There it is. Alright, rolling on the throttle again, and we're about ready to go. Before we take off, let's switch on the nav lights and our radio and transponder. There is no ATC available in Aerofly FS2, and as far as I know, you cannot fly on VetSim with this simulator. Let's punch in our VFR code 1200. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Aerofly FS2 once we're on our way. Alright, first liftoff. I'm gonna anticipate a little bit of left cyclic and left power pedal, of course, and slowly raising collective. Whoops, that was too much aft cyclic. A bad liftoff. I'm gonna try that again. And I'm hearing the low RPM horn. Apparently I haven't rolled on the throttle enough. But I'm going to set it down again and try for a better liftoff this time. Cyclic input needs to be very small. Don't seem to notice too much translating tendency, just a little bit. However, we are also alone in the aircraft, so as we're sitting on the right side, you can expect that this will actually help a little bit with the left skid low situation. And down we are. It can be a little bit tricky to set it down gently. So for another pickup this time, hopefully it's going to be better than last time. That was quite alright. I still seem to push in too much left cyclic here. Now let's do a pedal turn and then depart from this little airport. You're going to see which one it is in a few minutes. Let's scoot over to the next helipad and do another touchdown. It's been a while since I've used that simulator, to be honest. There's a floating tree or a floating bush up in the air. Now that doesn't seem right. But as you can see, the textures of the buildings as well as the tarmac here are of very high quality. Now keeping a steady hover and slowly reducing collective for a hopefully soft touchdown. You can reposition the helicopter by pushing in left pedal while still giving in a little bit of collective. Alright, let's go fly. Nose forward and raising collective a little bit. Oh, there it goes, the low RPM horn again. Still need to roll on more throttle. Now there's ETL. Helicopter is climbing. Here you can see the problem with orthographic sceneries. They look well from far away, however as you get closer they get a little bit blurry, a little bit out of focus. So that doesn't look too great yet. Oh my god. Sorry about that, throttle is now fully open. Up in the distance you can see where we're going to fly today. That's the rim of the Grand Canyon. We've been taking off from Grand Canyon helicopters at Grand Canyon National Park Airport. Now you notice that the aircraft is very stable in climb as well as in cruise. If you look at the real thing, you will find that it gets tossed around quite a bit. Maybe also due to the fact that Aerofly FS2 has a very basic and limited simulation of wind and turbulence. One thing I noticed is that the trim ball always seems to be centered, so it's not really helping me out too much. However, there is a trim feather on the canopy, which also gives you an indication of whether or not you are in trim. Doing about 100 knots and we still have plenty of power. Now we're reaching the rim of the canyon here, and let's see how it looks. as the ground drops below us, we get a little bit more distance to the ground textures, and all of a sudden it looks pretty amazing, pretty true to life. You can see the Colorado River meandering its way through the canyon floor. Pretty stable once you're in cruise flight. Just keep a steady hand on the cyclic. There's not too much that you need to do. In real life I would expect it to be a little bit windy or getting quite a few updrafts of warm air above the canyon here. However, these things don't seem to exist in Aerofly FS2 as of yet. The wind simulation is not very complex. So this is the question that I sort of put in the title of my video. Is it worth it to buy Aerofly FS2 for, I believe, 60 euros or something, just to be able to fly this R22? To be fair, you also get an EC135, which looks pretty terrific on top of the R22, as well as quite a few of fixed-wing aircraft. Aerofly FS2 has a few gems. This tour above the Grand Canyon is certainly one of them. However, the default scenery is rather limited. If you buy the simulator, you get the southwestern part of the United States, and that's it. So the rest of the world, you can fly there, however you are not going to have any airports. And the 3D imagery, the orthographic textures are going to be very low res, so it's it's not recommendable. There are a few other payware add-ons such as New York City, Miami, Florida, and the Netherlands, I believe. However, all in all, I get the feeling that development on this simulator is pretty dead by now. And even though you do get good frame rates, which after all is important for flying VFR, that comes at a price, obviously. There is no water in this simulator, so there's no animated water bodies. You just have simple textures that you can land your helicopter upon. There's also no form of traffic at all. You do not have air traffic, you don't have ground traffic such as vehicles or boats, and you do not have any people around. So I think I would get pretty good frame rates out of X-Plane as well if I deactivate all that stuff. On the other hand, the Grand Canyon in X-Plane's default scenery looks like SHIT compared to this. That's why I'm going to shut up for a while and let you enjoy the scenery. We're gonna fly back to the airport now, and as we get closer to the photoreal scenery, we can see that it gets blurry again. So the aircraft flies quite well. It is pretty stable, much more stable than I would expect an R22 to be. It sort of feels like a Jet Ranger to me. Cyclic response is rather sensitive, and the control inputs needed seem to be much smaller than what you see pilots do on the real aircraft. Tail rotor authority is very good, and after all, that's what Robinson helicopters are known for. It's a little unfortunate that they did not simulate the carb heater when everything else is so accurate. The 3D model and the texturing is truly amazing though. After all, it is fun to fly, especially if you fly it over one of those parts of the default scenery that are truly well made, such as the Grand Canyon, as well as the Monument Valley down in Utah. But sometimes it does get a little lonely flying in this simulator with its empty world. That's of course no problem when flying over the desert. However, if you fly through cities, you do get that Langoliers feeling, referring to the film, if you know what I mean. The simulator itself also has its downsides. I don't think it's going to be developed any further. That's one point. You do not have too much scenery to fly in, and while certain spots and certain scenery parts are very well made and look terrific, there are other parts such as this city down here that are just not so overwhelming. Also, as of yet, not a chance to join other simmers on VATSIM or iVeo or Pilot Edge. Approach feels natural, deceleration is absolutely no problem, so it handles pretty well. I hardly ever seem to need any right pedal, so as FSX's Dodo sim, this seems to be a left pedal only helicopter. Let's try not to hit those floating bushes. So all in all, it handles pretty well. It's a very good helicopter flight model. I would subscribe to that. However, it's not the best helicopter flight model out there, as some have stated. So I don't think that it is any better than X-Plane's or DCS's flight model, but it's probably up to par. However, compared to those simulators, this one lacks a lot of features, which in the end makes the product feel a little bit incomplete. And I think it's doubtful that we will see the missing features added later on. Even though I like to fly this helicopter, I have to say that I rarely do, so I don't use Aerofly FS2 a lot. However, I bought it. I'm the kind of guy that just wants to get his hands on every serious helicopter simulation out there and try it. But if you don't want to spend any extra money and you're sort of just looking for the right simulation platform for you, I recommend looking into X-Plane or DCS first. The visuals are in parts very good in Aerofly FS2, but let's be honest, if you're looking for good visuals, why don't you just check out MSFS 2020, right? Then again, they don't have an official helicopter flight model yet. So to summarize, if you got money to spare and you want to check out a good helicopter flight model, go for Aerofly FS2. If you're looking for a sophisticated and complex simulation platform that lets you fly all around the world with good scenery, you probably should go to X-Plane or MSFS 2020. Alright, let's check out the auto-rotation capabilities of this R22 simulation. An auto-rotation in an R22 can be very frightening, because you go down really fast. And I have to say, flying a successful, good auto-rotation in this R22 is very difficult, but then again, it's an interesting challenge. After all, it's supposed to be very realistic and one of the big pluses of this R22 simulation. We're approaching runway 24 of Teterboro Airport in New York City. Quality of the payware add-on of New York City is very good, however there are quite a lot of trees. I don't remember seeing so many trees in New York. After rolling off throttle, ease off the left pedal and pull the cyclic aft. Throttle is down and the ground is coming up fast. Initiating the flare, not too high above the ground. And we're down. Could have kept the skids a little bit more level on touchdown. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little aircraft review, and I hope to see you around next time.